Good morning, everyone in Schema Therapy Made Simple. I'm here today with Andrew Phipps, who is an ISST supervisor and trainer. He's in private practice, and his special interest in the schema therapy world is happy child mode and self-practice and self-reflection. And we're fortunate to have him here this morning to be getting into what is the happy child mode and why does it matter for clinical practice and people in general. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Nadine. Really appreciate the invitation for having me on.
Oh, you're very welcome. And Andrew's coming to us from Sydney, which is where he practices.
Yep.
And over the years, he's done many things and worked in quite sort of serious clinical contexts, I would call them anyway. We were just talking about it before we went live. And what is so interesting to me is, Andrew, that you found this passion for the happy child mode. And tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I guess the passion for that came, I guess, in a way as a little bit of a necessity. So working as a therapist, as we all do, finding that it's almost like there were two groups of people that seem to need a lot more of this. And I guess what is the happy child? What do they want more of? So the happy child in our model is the part of us that experiences joy and spontaneity. And so we assume for most of us growing up, if we feel safe enough and we're encouraged to play and be spontaneous and be silly, this part of us gets developed enough. But for people that have grown up in environments which are clearly unsafe and they feel unsafe to play, or environments that clearly just do not prioritize play, or it's not okay to be silly and playful, have not developed enough of this part of them. So I guess what that kind of looks like in practice, and what I noticed, there was two main groups. So there's a group of people who we would see as presenting with a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of inhibition, chronically depressed. So people basically with chronic anxiety type problems and chronic depression. And when you track back their history, it seemed very obvious that growing up, being playful and playing was not a particularly important thing. And so that kind of became a little bit of a challenge in terms of trying to activate that part of them. And started talking to colleagues and friends about this, about how people do it. Started doing some reading and obviously found some great work, particularly by Joan Farrell and Ida Shaw in a group context. But what I sort of struggled with at the time is I wasn't coming across a hell of a lot of stuff that talked in depth about how to do this in an individual setting. So that kind of sparked my interest, and it's I like to think of myself in some ways, but not every way, of course, as a playful person. So that's something that I wanted to get better at as a therapist. And I guess one group being those that are chronically anxious, chronically depressed, and well as another group as well, working with people for a long time with histories of personality disorders, as well as complex trauma, which I know is a big area for yourself. Finding that a lot of people with those sorts of presentations have this ceiling effect for joy. And I guess working with those people with those presentations for a period of time, finding that at some point people feel safe enough. At some point, people feel accepted enough. At some point, people feel nurtured enough, but they just don't feel a hell of a lot of joy. So I started to think about that, and I'm yet to see any research on this. And if anyone comes across any, please feel free to send it my way. But I came to think that in our model, a big part of the sense of self, I think, comes from contact with that happy child. Because I think, like, how do we know? How do we know who we are? Part of that has to be by knowing what sort of stuff that we like. How do we know what we like? We experience joy in combination with a stimulus. I'm a therapist because I experience moments of joy being a therapist. I'm somewhat of a musician because I experience moments of joy when playing music. So I feel like there's sort of two areas, both people with historically chronic inhibition, as well as people with sort of more long-term personality disorders, that I think, need this. And I think that was kind of my spark in a way to try and figure out how to get better at doing it.
Yeah, and I really think that you're onto something there, because in terms of fully becoming who you are, how can you do that without permission to be creative and try
exactly try stuff,
like and not like stuff, and work out where you want to put your energy in life.
Yes.
And then for many of the people we work with, the idea that you could choose that is even missing, because their lives have been so constructed by sometimes quite a well-meaning parent, but a very controlling parent.
Absolutely.
And I think definitely. And actually, I just have never really thought about it like this, but the joy being the key ingredient is probably where we can get the buy-in with clients for this work as well. Because if you don't have joy in your life is pretty dull. Whereas if we say to them, do you want to be more playful, they'll be like, oh no. Thanks.
Well, it's interesting that you say, sorry I interrupted you, I just got excited. It's interesting that you say that, because when they've done studies interviewing people that use play as part of their work, one of the things that they suggest is early on not to use the word play, because it kind of starts this immediate kind of socially internalized idea of this thing that's for children. And so they've found that we need alibis for play. So one of those sorts of things is, as you're saying, like an alibi would be like a rationale, like a treatment rationale, or an alibi would be a health benefit. And there's so many health benefits, like relationship benefits when we play together, physical benefits, emotional benefits. I think that that's important as well. Like, if, as you say, if you ask for someone to just play, like play is important, as adults we can't seem to see that. But if we use this idea of joy as being important for treatment, joy as being important for a whole range of reasons, I think you're dead right that we're likely to get a lot more buy-in.
Yes, yeah. And don't worry about the interrupting. I'm a big interrupter myself, particularly if I get an idea.
Yeah.
I'll do it to you, I'm sure.
Cool.
And so, because I was just thinking with my own children, watching them move from having total permission to play psychologically to totally having a meltdown about the idea that I might even suggest that they play, because they've moved, I think it happened around 11, 12. And we turned up at a playground, which used to be a weekend thing we did. And my daughter just was like, what are you making me do?
Yeah.
And it was over. Like, I think that was the moment where I was like, oh, and so it's difficult because we know it's so important, but it's difficult for clients to feel safe enough to re-engage with that energy. And, by now, most of us working in the adult context, our clients are fully aged adults. I don't know if they're always mature in terms of their emotional self adults. So it should be safer because they're not sort of in that in-between land of adolescence anymore. But so we've got all these barriers to the happy child mode.
Absolutely.
It's sort of essential to having this full, rich, meaningful life that most of us are working towards with our clients.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as you talk about your children, obviously they felt safe enough to play, but at some point we become self-conscious, and that's like a really big barrier. That's a really big barrier to play. It's interesting. And as you say, so there's external barriers to play, and that might be the observation of other people. And interestingly, that's sort of one way to try and enhance play. We can't have observers. Like in a group context, or even in an individual context, we're trying to work towards doing something more playful. We've kind of got to do it and kind of model it ourselves. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And as you say, there's external barriers. There's also internal barriers. So as we try and activate that part of the client, keeping in mind that the happy child is a feeling mode, and we're trying to access the feeling modes, there's going to be barriers. There's going to be coping modes, and there's going to be critic modes. There's going to be parts of us that say, no, this is not safe. No, you're going to look silly, which is like the coping mode. And then there's the critical part, which is saying, you are an idiot. You are childish. Look at you, you fool. That sort of stuff. And so we've got to work with those modes as well.
Yeah, and so I think I love that you say that it's a feeling state, because sometimes in supervision I hit that with supervisors, they don't realize that the modes have different feelings attached to them. And I'm like, yes, well, that's really how I would map it out, and that's how you feel the shift almost, is because it comes with not only the cognitions but how you feel as well. So happy child. And I think one of the things, and perhaps we can talk about this later, is sometimes people feeling like they might be out of control in happy child mode. Like that's a fear. If I just become joyful and creative and expressive, like, is my critic disappearing, or my healthy adult mode? But generally, yeah, I know. I'll ask you your thoughts on that.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with that is that there's some level of inhibition, and it sounds like a coping mode to me. So if we might ask someone to be, participate in an activity which is more playful, or deliberately practice playfulness or silliness, there might be this part of them that feels like that's not okay. And so then the work is, we're working with this coping mode, much in the same way we would working with a coping mode that's stopping more vulnerable feelings like shame, fear, sadness. So we're very much sort of doing the same thing, but the affect and the affect and the behavior is quite different that we're trying to encourage. We're trying to get someone into the play state where we feel joy, we feel like in the moment, we kind of feel free. And the amazing thing about the play state is that once we're in it, we more or less lose that sense of self-consciousness, which is kind of like the opposite of those schemas in the hypervigilance inhibition domain, like emotional inhibition, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually. I often say to people that for me, that feeling, if I can think of one way to capture that feeling, is jumping on a trampoline or swinging on a swing. And it's like, that's just that moment of freedom and whoa, sort of thing. Not that all play is that alive, but I find that unless you've got those kind of really traumatized clients who had absolutely no play or access to toys or anything, most people can relate to, they know those two feelings. And I sort of talk about that, I don't know, just to get that feeling state idea, or just what we're aiming for here. And
how do you do that? Do you do that through the activity itself, or do you do that like through imagery? Or
mostly it's just when I'm introducing it and I talk about it with people. But yeah, it would be great to have a trampoline in the office. But
wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Yeah.
My room in here in Greenwood is bigger than my old room, but it's not quite that big. But yeah, I think because sometimes people just don't really even know what we're going for in terms of the sort of feeling that we have.
No, I think you're right. I think that's a big part of the job is we're trying to find a way to kind of trigger that state. So where I kind of think like imagery is really important, like really useful. Like even if you use, one of the stalwart techniques, the Toy Story imagery, we're trying to kind of activate that play state, and as well the idea of mirror neurons, I think is really important, like showing people pictures of children being playful or children smiling. It's amazing when you look at that stuff, the way that you start to feel, because it's like that part of us that kind of like feels the same affect as the person in front of us.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's almost using that sort of stuff. The idea of mirror neurons, I think, could also be like an assessment strategy. So you show someone like a clip of children playing, or you show someone a bunch of pictures of kids happy, and you ask, how do you feel as you look at this? For the most part, people will say, oh yeah, good, I kind of feel happy, I kind of feel warm. Just sort of feel happy. But then of course, people that are much more inhibited does say, I feel absolutely nothing, or I feel guilty, or I feel bad because I should be feeling something but I can't. And it's kind of like a bit of an assessment strategy,
isn't it? And I think it's about getting it right for the person too, because I know the toy shop thing, and I remember being in a training and that being done, and it just created this not great reaction in me because of my own history, and the toys were all quite moralized in my childhood and controlled. So even though that's probably exactly what I needed to do, was to be able to go free in a toy shop and get whatever, I still wasn't really there in terms of my own development to have that freedom in the imagery. So sometimes these exercises, I guess it's not really going wrong, but they don't go in the way we would hope. But as a therapist, we just take the information from that and explore that, but also redirect, like try another way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're right. And what you're saying is interesting as well, because I do feel like we have different types of play. We're temperamentally suited to different types of play. And one thing that I'm trying to figure out how to do better is to find ways to figure out what types of play temperamentally suit people. So there's this book called by the name, a lady named Barbara Brennan, something like How We Play, the way that adult women have lost their play and how to get back, something like that. And she has this idea of like heart play, which is the type of play that we engaged in as children that felt good. And so one thing that I've been working on is trying to access that type of play. So getting the play affects in therapy with people, asking them to close their eyes and think of a time growing up where they felt that same way. And usually what you can find is that you start to get a sense of what sort of things temperamentally suit us and temporarily feel good. So it enables us to kind of guide the type of stuff that we might try out and encourage someone to do a bit more purposefully, rather than kind of like this haphazard, some people find jumping on a trampoline good, how about you try that? Some people find going to the beach really good, how about you try that? Like it's a way of kind of guiding someone towards something which is more likely to have like bang for your buck, so to speak.
I think that's really important, because all I think of, with some of these suggestions is like a CBT behavioural activation list. I don't know if you've ever seen them. The things you can choose from.
Yeah.
It's like half of them won't be suitable, and
that's it.
And it's overwhelming for the client. But I think it's really interesting, and I'm going to look at that a little bit more about how we match temperament too. And certainly, you probably know there's a study happening through Monash on the happy child mode.
I did an interview with the research, with Isabel. Yeah, it sounds awesome.
I think there's something in what you're saying, because when I was talking to her about my own happy child mode and some of these memories, like the trampolining and stuff, I directly connected to things I did as a child and playing in a pool with a best friend, and I could feel that mode activating. And that's where I think imagery, definitely we can use that in a way that's can enhance already existing memories of that. More difficult for those people who don't have that, but I think that's really the rarest. Most people have got some memory of play.
Yes.
And I could actually feel it kind of layering on as I was talking about it through the interview, just all these memories. And because I do EMDR as well, I was sort of thinking about stacking decks and using EMDR bilateral stimulation to strengthen all of that as well.
Yeah,
But
great.
yeah, so each of us probably, and I think I'm just also thinking, with the toy in the store thing, if you're a client who struggles to make decisions and know what you want, and that's part of your schema history, that happy child exercise might not work either. So that your schemas and your temperament, it's all coming into what's going to work, but also, what you may need to be able to, what you could do at the beginning of treatment in happy child might look very different to when you've had your subjugation schemas and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Healed.
Yeah.
That's good. So we'll start with the questions, if that's
okay
with you. So let's start with one. So what types of clients benefit from happy child mode work?
So I think I probably just to recap, like I kind of think that two main groups, well, actually three groups. So there's the group which have the traditional hypervigilance and inhibition, chronically anxious, chronically depressed. There's the group of people later on in therapy which have more severe problems, where we kind of get this kind of ceiling affect for joy. So it's a good thing to be doing once a lot of those primary attachment needs are met enough. And I know at the moment I have this really broad concept of who needs happy child, but I think in a way we kind of all do as yes. adults. Like we've like this, we go through this socialization process, and there's still this assumption that play is the domain of children, whereas it's if you read studies on play, it's almost like reading a list of health benefits of doing a particular sort of activity. There's cardiovascular benefits, there's relationship benefits, there's a whole bunch of other health benefits, emotional benefits. And I do feel like finding ways to play and finding ways to be more playful can help all of us. Yes. I mean, I kind of feel like us as therapists as well, like that sort of link at the moment that I'm finding with the happy child stuff, as well as the self-practice, self-reflection stuff. Like we've all become adults, and we've all gone through systems which teach us to be scientists, practitioners. And so that's very, very necessary. But for many of us, we kind of start to have this sense of, in our work, there's a right way to do something, and it kind of, I feel like it stifles our creativity in a lot of ways. Yes. Where we're trying to find like the right and perfect way to do something, but I feel like we could be more innovative if we felt freer. So I kind of feel like us as therapists as well could yes. deal with this.
Absolutely. Well, I thought you were going to say everyone, to be honest. But
oh, well, I do think that, but I'm trying not to be like too over-inclusive. You know, those people who just say, oh, this is the panacea, this is the cure-all. That's all we've got to do. That's not me, but I do think we could all benefit.
Yeah. What about, I'm just thinking a group that may not need it as much as others, but what about people who are already kind of very impulsive and indulge in a lot of fun and me time, and perhaps sometimes not taking enough care of responsibility? Is that the same as happy child mode, or is that undisciplined child, or what's going on there with people who do a really good job of the stuff?
I think it's undisciplined child. Yeah, I've not thought about that. I mean, I think it has a different feel as well. You see what's interesting as well, I think types of play in excess can be a coping strategy and a kind of like a coping mode. Think about like computer games, for example.
Yeah.
Like in our family, we on the weekend we like to play Overcooked as a family. It's fun. Right. And our kids like to play different sorts of computer games, but obviously computer games and TV and all these sorts of things are a type of avoidance strategy. So I do feel like it can be a little bit about how much it's doing, and again, the function of the behavior. Yes. Is it to feel joy? Is it to kind of get connection? Is it to enhance life? Or, as you say, is it to avoid something? Or is it to kind of,
Yeah,
I
and
think that's the distinction.
The play is not really coming from the happy child mode, then, isn't it? It's really an avoidant.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree with you on therapists, and you probably know some of my work is helping people to be freer in their practice and really embody their intuition and creative instincts rather than following protocols and manuals.
Yes,
because
so
it's
important.
really what the clients need a lot of as well. I think sometimes when we get too manualized and protocol focused, it's re-injuring for people.
Well, it's also one of those things where if we get too manualized, we lose the ability to apply a model to a novel presentation. And every single person I've ever worked with has been at least somewhat of a novel presentation. Yes. So I do, coming back to this idea
I think you have to believe that, actually, because otherwise you don't build the right kind of relationships with people to get the change. If you just think everybody's kind of a bit the same, and it can, I think if you're a bit burnt out, that can creep in where you start to be like, oh, 5 of them with domestic violence this week, and it all feels like the same person, but they're not, and they've all got, unique things that we need to be working with and getting to know. So when would you introduce the happy child mode?
So primary attachment needs have to be addressed, in my opinion, enough in order for us to feel safe enough and free enough to play. So we need to feel safe enough in therapy, and if it's to do it out of therapy, safe enough in our lives in order to play. We need to feel accepted enough in therapy. We need to feel nurtured enough, and we need to feel like things are reasonably predictable in order to start to integrate some of this stuff. So, and one way that one sort of benchmark that I tend to use is, can the person accept the care that I'm providing and experience it as healing? And does the person have at least a theoretical level of compassion for themselves and for their vulnerability? So an example of this being met, kind of like a stage where you'd maybe start to consider, doing some happy child work. You're doing some imagery. The person, you come in, you meet the need, you provide nurturance, safety, or whatever it is, and you ask the person, how does that feel? And they're saying, like, actually feels really good. I feel safe, or I feel really cared for. I just, I actually feel like more stronger. The antithesis of that, or the opposite of that, would be, you come in, you meet the need, and you ask the person, how do they feel? And they say, I feel absolutely nothing. I feel absolutely nothing. So one indicator is that the person isn't able to receive that care in that moment. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done in meeting those needs and bypassing coping nodes before we can even consider doing happy child work. In terms of like the theoretical idea of self-compassion, like say, for example, you're doing some chair work and you ask the person, could you tell that vulnerable part of you sitting on the chair that you see them and you care about them? They say, I do care about you. The opposite of that would be, what can you say to this vulnerable part of you to provide some care? And they say, I hate that part of me. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of bypassing coping modes, reducing critic modes, work to be done in terms of providing acceptance as well. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for explaining that, because I think it probably can go very badly if you bring it in too early, and absolutely, if the relationship isn't there for the safety of play to occur in the space of the therapist, it's going to fall flat. And certainly I agree with you that critic modes can be very active.
Yes.
And I'm going to swear, but I think they just crap all over play and child mode. So
100%. 100%.
then you're setting the client up to have what happens.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. One thing that I say to my own critic is, you are the thief of fun. You take all the fun out of it. And I think you're absolutely right that they do. The critic modes crap all over the happy child and crap all over fun.
It's really I think ends up being quite harmful to the client if we do that, and then it's the opposite of what we want them to experience. And I guess it depends on the level of resilience that a client has, but some of them won't tolerate that very well at all. And,
well, I think you're right. It's like asking someone to jog before they can crawl.
Yeah, because it's good for you.
Yeah, do this. What do you mean? Like that's so far away from. Yeah.
I think that's really.
I don't even know if I want to live yet. I don't even want to live, let alone play. What do you mean?
Find some joy.
Yeah. So, but I think we can overdo it as well. Like we can kind of wait too long, but I kind of feel like this idea of can the person at least receive care, and can the person theoretically have an idea that they're not inherently bad is a good kind of yardstick.
Yeah. So I guess, it sounds like people with that defectiveness shame scheme are really strong. We probably have to be quite cautious with them to make sure that they're ready. If they've got that I'm bad, I'm terrible sort of thing. But thank you for that. Yeah. That's really helped me actually in terms of work out when I will feel comfortable to offer that to people.
Yeah.
So I'll just find the next question. It's a bit of a long one, I think. What are some key tasks this is actually just related to what we were talking about. What are some key tasks or exercises you might set to enhance happy child when there is a strong critic and help the surrender coping mode?
So I think some of the things that I've already mentioned, like we can use imagery to try and get in contact with that part of them, and in the image we do mode work. So for example, we might ask the person to close their eyes and get an image of an upcoming situation where play is possible. Maybe play with kids, pets, or with their friends, be playful. Mm-hmm. And we might one thing that I do is for some reason I've called it like follow the leader. So mm-hmm. I kind of ask the person to imagine that the happy child part of them is kind of in front, and what does the happy child part of them want to do, and to follow their lead. And so for some people that are I guess healthier or have more contact with that part of them, they can just follow that happy child part. But for a lot of us, we can't. We say, what, you ask the person, okay, so how about you sort of be free in this moment? How about you just sort of, you go forward and kind of, play with these other people, engage with the activity, and they're saying stuff like, no, I can't, or what's coming through your mind, and they say, I look like an idiot. So we've kind of identified that, no, I can't. There's this inhibition that's going on, and you look like an idiot. This punitive critic part going on. Then in the image, we'll deal with those modes in turn. So understanding the function of the inhibition, understanding the function of the coping mode, as well as trying to send away the critical part of them as well. I kind of think as well, I've been playing around with this idea of, I don't think I've quite landed on a kind of like a technique as it is, but like using movement in session, because I guess the natural state of a happy child is not usually stillness, and usually what we usually as adults, movement is quite functional. We move around to do things. We cook. We we clean, we go places, or it's for health benefits. And the idea of using movement in a way which is apparently purposeless, and I guess play is apparently purposeless, can be, somewhat freeing, but can also be very triggering. So I've been finding, playing around with ideas of using movement in the session, gentle swaying as a way to try and access that part of them, as a way to kind of almost kind of trigger the coping strategy, or trigger the punitive critic modes, and then using chair work to deal with those modes as well.
That sounds really, really cool, actually. And I think movement, for all sorts of reasons, and I use movement a bit with trauma work, but in terms of how that would look in terms of this work is really quite exciting, actually. That's great. One of the things I just was thinking of is, I was talking to you a bit before about the horse riding, and I've got my horse shirt on, and that was my little girl thing. And one of the things that
it's your heart play. Something about that.
What happens when people's heart play becomes the domain of the demanding critic? So, quite often kids have a talent or a heart play area that they're very good at as well. And it becomes, do you sometimes find that crops up in the work too, that people, because they're trying to excel all the time rather than just be, that we have to kind of undo that, or they can't go back to that?
I do. And it's sort of, it's almost kind of like becomes like a as you say, like a part of them that's very demanding. Like play is no longer purposeless. Play is no longer engaged for pure enjoyment. It like has some sort of a function. It's like to attain some sort of a goal. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I'd be looking for alternate strategies, because it's almost like in that moment, the players become kind of infected. The players become kind of contaminated by the critic or these expectations. I think that's what I'd do.
Just go elsewhere with it.
I think so. Like something that had the same sort of feeling, same sort of function, but didn't have those similar sorts of connotations. Having said that, I think it'd be also useful to kind of identify the types of modes that are coming up. Again, like back to this idea of at one stage, this person may have found this activity very freeing and very joyful, but there's kind of like this internal dialogue that started around it. You can't just do this for the sake of it. You can't just do it because it makes you happy. You've got to do it, and you've got to do it really, really well. Yes. So it's almost like we're fighting against those parts and fighting against those schemas that have actually infected the activity.
Yeah.
So maybe
you see it a lot in musicians, I think, as well, where in order to be really good at it, I don't know how you do that without a demanding critic, and certainly the whole music education business tends to foster that. But I think some people do at some point move into that happy child mode, a space of freedom, and they're probably the best performers in the world can sometimes, but they've used a mode to get to the point where they're excellent.
But they can still but they can still play. They can still they can still get into that state, that in the moment state where they're not self-conscious.
Flip.
And it's interesting that you say that, because like having had a history in the music industry, that's why people burn out, because it becomes, once people reach a certain level of exposure, it becomes more about engagement with audience, more about numbers on the door, more about record sales. It becomes about numbers and less about creativity. And I mean, it's a big struggle for a lot of musicians, apart from the fact that musicians are grossly underpaid for the most part anyway. And it's just such a struggle of trying to kind of maintain that part of them that wants to engage in their activity just for the sake of it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I think my
struggle.
experience of it was more in the terms of especially that sort of classical music training too. There's just so much repetition and perfection required.
Yes.
That a lot of that kind of, and then I think a lot of in that industry, at least I found anyway, a lot of highly critical feedback
Yes.
about, you know, skills and comparisons, which is kind of kills some of that.
I think it's interesting that you say I think temperament comes into it a bit as well. Like I think so. Stuart Brown in his book on play talks about different types of play personalities, and one of those personalities is a kinesthete, where people that engage in physical activity, it's less about success and more about pushing your body to be able to do a certain sort of thing. And in that sort of domain, I do think a lot of people do experience the sense of joy through perfection. But for some people, that's not going to suit them. Like some people just want to be free. You know, amazing jazz players, amazing improvisational players, you know, just want to feel free. And that's more about a creative sort of a play.
Yes.
So I think it's sort of about making sure that they're talking specifically about music, the type of music that you're engaging in suits your personality. Are you the type of person that finds joy in perfection, or are you the type of person that finds joy in freedom and spontaneity and joy in creativity?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think, you know, we could probably apply that across the therapist world as well.
Totally.
That we sort of really vary in that.
Yes.
And sometimes you see quite a lot of conflict because both sides can become quite polarized on this. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And the last question is, if we give happy child mode as homework, this can be problematic for some clients as there becomes a sense of demand and performance expectation.
Yeah.
And we sort of talked about this a bit, but how can we reduce the potential for happy child work to become another thing on the list, or not
in
doing
addition,
it right, not being good enough at it?
I think that's a great question. Like in addition to like looking at the modes that are interfering, like the coping mode as well as like the critic modes, I reckon finding ways to integrate the activity into people's normal life. So like as children, we have this natural sense of wonder, but somewhere along the way we lose this. And I feel like sense of awe and wonder is a natural play state. And one thing that I've been doing myself and encouraging a lot of my clients to do is in when we've got some sort of journey or like on the way to work, you're actively trying to engage with that part of you that sees the world through a child's eyes. And I've sort of been putting together like some imagery activities and some practice activities to engage that part of them. But I feel like we can obviously taking time out for play and doing a purposeful play activity is a really good idea, but we can find ways to integrate it into like our normal life. And another thing as well is that being playful day to day is a type of play. And one researcher, René Proyer, he's a playfulness researcher, and he sees playfulness on 4 domains. Hopefully I remember them. There's like other directed playfulness, which is joking around with others and like diffusing difficult situations. There's intellectual playfulness, which is playing around with ideas, which is the type of stuff that you and I are kind of doing now. There's whimsical playfulness, which is sort of like a attitude of joy in the bizarre and odd things. And then there's lightheartedness, like seeing things that come up as challenges rather than problems, and seeing the world from a lighthearted view. And he found through his research that if we purposefully be more playful, it actually changes this thing about us, which is actually a personality trait. Playfulness is a personality trait, and by purposely being more playful in our lives, it actually can change this part of us. We become more playful, and then we get all the other benefits, right? The joy and the kind of like the intimacy, connection, and stuff that goes along with that.
So it's a trait that can be built and strengthened.
Yes.
Over time.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Which in our model is strengthening and building the happy child. It's just a particular sort of way of doing it.
Yeah.
Like in a day-to-day way of the way that we are in the world.
And I think so that incidental playfulness, and I love this idea of these 5 different channels, because I think maybe perhaps we bring our own overlay therapies of what play is, but this actually gives you a range of options that you can give clients, and I guess they have a lean to one or the other.
Yes.
Like I know for myself, when I'm probably my most I'll be just dancing at home by myself, and stuff like that, just as I move around, because there's a lightness and a silliness that's there. But, when I haven't been well in myself, all of that goes, and the laughter goes, and the lightheartedness goes, right? So but those are not things I have to plan or make happen. And I think particularly for that group, a lot of us work with, because it's such a challenging time of life, we work with women sort of between 30 and 50. And they are feeling very burdened. So if you're like, now you've got to add some fun into your work, they can be like, where is that?
Where am I going to do that?
But these things like just bopping around a bit and is not hard to achieve, and something they can keep doing, but if that's their thing, obviously. So I really like those examples. I've just checked. I don't think we've got any questions live, but it's been really great to have you here, and certainly I like the way that you talk about playing around with ideas as being play, because sometimes I think that's something with myself. I find such joy in writing about things and all that stuff, and people say to me, isn't that work? And I'm like, well, it sort of is, but it feels really good. So and if you put a downer on my play,
but it's interesting though, if you ask any of the play researchers what is the opposite of play, no one says work. The opposite of play is not work. The opposite, the opposite of play is depression, is misery, is fear. Because you and I are doing our work now, and I don't know about you, but I'm having a good time. Like it feels playful. It kind of feels fun. So it's possible when I go to my masterclass in a couple of weeks that somehow I've ended up on the outcome measures for supervisees because my time didn't work out that I originally booked. It's not going to feel like play, but that's it. But even play activities are not always fun. Like you might be, a really keen, sports person. Training's not always fun.
No. That's where it gets so interesting, doesn't it? There's parts of it that are the work to get the play outcome that some people are happy to do because the game might be in that zone. Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Nadine. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely loved it. And before we finish up, do you have any upcoming ways in which people can train with you or work with you on this topic or anything else that's coming up?
So, in terms of specific play stuff, I just did a workshop last week in Sydney, which was really fun. I'm hoping to get over to Perth by the end of the year. I'd love you to come along if you
send me the date. I need advance notice with me, but that's
so hopefully doing that, and I'm also applying to do a workshop at Enlight in Melbourne next year as well. Eventually I'd like to kind of put together eventually I will put together some happy child stuff to do online as well, but I think
that would be great. So I definitely will look out for that Perth date, but I am going to come over to Enlight unless some disaster happens in my life, which I don't know. The last few years, you can never predict what's going to happen. But it's been great. And we'll say bye to everyone on Facebook now. And I'll just meet with you for a few minutes after. Thank you.
Okay, no worries, Nadine. Bye. Thanks. Oh, could I just say one more thing, if that's okay? A bit of shameless self-promotion, that a colleague of mine, Rob Brockman, and I do a self-practice and self-reflection workshop in the Blue Mountains a couple of times a year. We've got one coming up in November 4th and 5th, and we also incorporate a bunch of happy child stuff there as well. So if anyone would like to come along to that retreat, that would be wonderful.
Sounds like a beautiful location and
it's
a lovely
really
time
nice.
spent. So
thank you.
All right, bye for now, everybody.
Thanks so much.